Good evening. On behalf of MMoCA staff and Board of Trustees, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the opening reception for William Villalongo, Myths and Migrations. Major sponsorship for the exhibition has been generously provided by Mary Ellen and Joe Sensenbrenner in memory of Stephen Fleischman. Additional support is provided in the memory of Stephen Fleischman by Diney Baleza and Barney Sheafor, Dan and Natalie Erdman, Darcy Kind and Mark Vitale, Catherine Howarth-Ryan, and Jim and Jessica Yaley. As we thank the sponsors who helped bring the exhibition to Madison, MMoCA would also like to acknowledge the Ho-Chunk people on whose ancestral land Madison was built and recognize the contributions of the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. Tonight's lecture is being recorded, so please refrain from photography and remember to silence your cell phones. Though, while you have your cell phone out, feel free to quickly and discreetly open your favorite social media app and follow the museum at MMoCA Madison to learn more about upcoming talks and programs. Next up on the museum's calendar is the annual meeting on May 8th, where the museum's new Gabriel Haberlin director, Paul Baker Prindle, will lay out his vision for MMoCA. The museum is incredibly excited to present William Villalongo, Myths and Migrations. The exhibition showcases nearly 2 decades of the artist's creative output, tracing the multiple stages of the artist's creative journey. Highly recognized for his paintings, collages, and signature velour paper cutouts, Villalongo's striking visual narratives invite the viewer to engage with the complexities and precarity of Black existence. His imaginative compositions combine motifs and genres drawn from different cultures and historical periods to powerfully interrogate themes related to the visible erasure of the Black and immigrant experience, offering a fresh and thought-provoking perspective. In his quest to find relevant metaphors for how to exist as a Black subject in the world, the artist takes a unique approach, turning to symbology, art history, humor, ancient Mediterranean artifacts, and even P-Funk lyrics. This diverse range of influences, combined with his signature delicate paper cutting and collage techniques, invite the audience to delve deeper into his creative process. To quote his artist statement, "To cut and paste over and under, to cut and see through, to cut and back up, to cut and paint in and on is, to enact, on real material, the felt experience of moving through the world in a racialized body, with the hope that it conveys something of the precarity of life itself, and we are all implicated in the struggles of others." His assemblage-like compositions draw inspirations from myth and history to merge time periods, add complexity, and expand our understanding of Black culture and its rich past. In his most recent work, Villalongo explores the lingering effects of migration, not only as an extraction from home, but also as an opportunity for transformation and rebirth. The use of crystals, for instance, signifies healing and symbolizes the strength of the Black community in the face of displacement. Similarly, the presence of butterflies implies metamorphosis, representing the transformative nature of migration and the potential for growth and change. A painter, printmaker, sculptor, and installation artist, William Villalongo's creative output also includes writing and curatorial projects, including the noted Black Pulp traveling exhibition. He received his BFA from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art and his MFA from the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. His work is included in many notable collections, and Villalongo is the recipient of the prestigious Louis Comfort Tiffany Award and the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant. In 2022, Villalongo attended the American Academy in Rome as a Jules Guerin and Harold M. English Rome Prize Fellow in Visual Art. Sharing the residency at the American Academy in Rome at the time was the composer and pianist Igor Santos, a Brazilian musician currently based in the United States. Like Villalongo, his work investigates how non-Western voices interrogate the canon. Their conversations about processing the legacy of migration prove significant not only in their personal lives, but as a muse for the artwork they each make. One of their sculptural collaborations, Beacon, is included in Myths and Migrations. After Villalongo's artist talk, Santos will take the stage for another of their collaborative works, a multimedia and prepared piano composition entitled Offering. After the performance, then there will be time for Q&A. Santos will give an encore performance of Offering later tonight at 7:40 p.m. to help close out the evening. Now, please join me in welcoming William Villalongo to the stage.
Good evening. You guys hear me okay? I want to thank you, Bob, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Robin Reisenfeld, for this beautifully curated rendition of Myths and Migrations. And thank you, the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art, for inviting me here and hosting this exhibition. The exhibition Myths and Migration really represents a small excerpt of 20 years of me making art. So it is a really special moment for me to see all of these things in a room that have been dispersed around in various places for the past 20 years and seeing them come together. I want to tonight try to, in the next 20 minutes, which is hard, but in the next 20 minutes I'm going to try to give you a bit of a look back at that 20 years and tell you where I'm at now and give you some sense of what's going on in those works materially and how I make them as well as ideas. So what you're looking at, if you've had a chance to read, is a quote by W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois is a sociologist in the late 19th century, early 20th century. He sort of bridged this. He bridged the turn of the century. So much I could say about Du Bois, but one of the lasting ideas that Du Bois gives us is in a book called The Souls of Black Folk. And it's the idea of double consciousness. So this quote that you're looking at here really tries to explain this idea of a double consciousness of walking through the world in a racialized body, at once understanding one's personal identity, but being ever conscious that how the world is perceiving you. See if that works. Forward. Should I just click? Okay, I'll do the clicker. Okay. So lots of things come into play in the sort of primordial state of making the work and understanding who I am as an artist. And so I wanted to share with you a few ideas and things that have sort of influenced my thinking over a long period of time. I identify as a painter, and I know when you go upstairs, if you've been up there, there's more things than paintings up there. There's sculptures, there's collage-based works, but I was trained as a painter. And so when I think about anything that I'm making, I'm constantly in the space of making painting and thinking about painting. So to that point, this slide that you're seeing, or this image that you're seeing here on your right, it's a genre painting, but it replays this Pliny's art historical work. It's one of the earliest works of art history, and he talks about the beginnings of painting and he tells this sort of parable or this sort of story of a young maiden who is seeing her partner, or the partner tells her that he's going to war, and in that moment, she doesn't sort of cry or hug him or any of this stuff. She actually moves past him and she traces his shadow. So this idea that painting itself is this capturing of a loss and a presence, or capturing of a loss, like a shadow, in a sense, is a kind of loss or emptiness, right? It's not a physical form. So she traces his shadow. So this sort of romantic 19th century romantic painting is a rendition of that story. So you'll see a lot in the work that I think a lot about idea of loss, or the idea of absence and presence in feeling and tracing And those things are all really important to me in terms of the ideas in the work and how I make things. The other slide on the left is an image from Sun Ra's Space of the Place. Sun Ra is a late 50s sort of fusion, jazz fusion. He's a musician. He's hard to place in any real genre. He sort of predates ideas of Afrofuturism, which we talk about now, into this kind of wild mix of jazz and what we now understand as funk. Sun Ra had an idea about, and I need to get my notes. So Sun Ra had this idea that there is a space and place where Black people can be sort of transformed or sent to escape racism and all of the poverty, all of the ills of Black life. And he is particularly talking about a Black life of the 1950s to the 1970s. So this all has a very particular time stamp on it. I believe Spaces and Places like 1973, 74. And this is a totally wild film, and it's completely guerrilla film. And what he is transporting is that what's interesting when you see the film is like he's not just transporting Black people, he's also translating the Black in you to space. So there's this one scene where there's it's a really wild scene where this this Black guy, he's sort of like, he has his white wife, and and there's the stereotypes of like of not being Black enough or whatever, right? And literally the guy splits into two, and the Black part of him goes to space, and the other part of him stays on Earth. So it's a really kind of wild film for like it's a really wild film for 1970s. But I just wanted to share with you a quote. He is coming down, and he finds himself in this one scene. He's at a sort of a community center with a bunch of teenage kids, and they're like, what the hell is this guy? What is he wearing? And this is the 1970s, and so he was looking wild to them, even in the 1970s, for those of you who understand that joke. So he says to them, he said, the one kid says, hey man, are you real? Are you for real? And he says, I'm not real. I'm just like you. You do not exist in this society. If you did, your people wouldn't be speaking about equal rights. You're not real. If you were, you'd have some status among the nations of the world. So we are both myths. I do not come to you as a reality. I come to you as the myth, because that is what Black people are, myths. I came from a dream that the Black man dreamed long ago. I'm actually a presence sent to you by your ancestors. Powerful moment in that film for me. Yep. It's a tap. Okay. So this is 2003. It seems like ancient history at this point. But still in the 21st century. And I am really thinking about all of these things and thinking about like, how can I think about the mythology or make this relationship between mythology, Western mythology, a student of art history, a student of Western art school, like it did the whole thing, right? And how can I make this relationship between mythology and the race myth, the mythos of race and race fiction? And I began to look at these genre paintings and Western art history and really trying to interject the Black presence within that context. And that was really my point of making these works. So I don't know, you guys have gone to comprehensive museums, you've seen the little cherubim flying around, and so my idea was to kind of pull in those forms, this as a very adult genitalia, playing off of the ideas of stereotypes in relationship to blackness, because for me, stereotypes are a type of mythology, right, that play out in our culture. And you also see that this is, and that I'm playing around with these floral forms that continue to follow me in the work, and I think about nature as a place, this kind of heterogeneous place where kind of anything can kind of happen, right? Like all kinds of things are possible within this space. It's the opposite of being a minimalist. And I kind of, as I'm thinking about this, I begin to focus more on a kind of particular genre. So I'm looking specifically at the nymph and bather genres. I'm thinking a lot about, I'll go here. I'm thinking a lot about Picasso's Demoiselle d'Avignon, which is a pretty wild painting. It's this one here on the right side of the screen. And I obviously put this in the wrong order, but I'm thinking a lot about specifically what would happen if we took that painting and we flipped it back into a kind of pictorial space, right, where the figures were real and the abstraction was there, but was not affecting the bodies, right? Not abstracting the bodies, but was in the conversation somehow. And what I came to was that these would be black women, and they would be dealing with abstraction, the terms of abstraction and painting in some way. And they would be within the genre of the bather in art history. So I sort of take this probably as far as I can go for at least about 10 years of making, playing around with how do I flip around, how do I think about this narrative and change the terms where now we have a society of black women who use abstraction for utilitarian reasons, for play, as a tool for culture. Within the context of the mythology of the bather, of Demeter or Diana in the Roman, that this goddess is sort of lives within this kind of context of nymphs and bathers and a space of magic, and we are on the outside, and Actios, we are Actios on the outside, sort of looking in, maybe possibly being changed into a stag. And so the paintings are shaped. Full disclosure, I just kind of looked at Ellsworth Kelly paintings and tried to steal as much shape language from those things. So I'm thinking about these different places of viewing, that the painting itself or the shape of the painting is one way of looking in one term of abstraction, and then you kind of enter the borders and then the layers. And in this painting, called The Painting Lesson, is really a classic art school. If you go to art school, you see this scene all the time. I teach drawing, of students doing figure drawing, and in this case, they're painting the abstraction and not the figure. And I'm using this historical image of Josephine Baker, and Josephine Baker is kind of in my mind, this figure that's really amazing, because she's able to kind of take stereotype and the kind of uglier things that have been sort of thrown at stereotypes that thrown at black people and sort of upended them and turned them into humor, turned them into play, and turned them into money, quite frankly. Going to Paris, being being a vaudeville sort of a cabaret dancer, ends up being a spy for the French in World War II, ends up being an amazing philanthropist her entire life, you know, adopting, like, I don't know, something like 15 children or more at some point, and living long enough to be involved in the civil rights movement and being one of the leaders in that struggle. And she did it with humor and being very subversive, and being extremely contrary. And I think that that's sort of, if I could be or make in a way, I would want to do it like as Josephine Baker would. And this is the sort of famous photo that comes from the banana skirt. The other image is Man Ray, and just I usually do my little art history talk and talk about this kind of idea of the primitivism and the affinities with Europe looking at African art and how that's entered the Western canon and has been a progenitor of ideas of abstraction that we deal with today. This is me thinking about just images and how abstraction is so tied into Black culture in a way that makes the kind of absurd narrative that I'm dealing with actually not so absurd, that there is a kind of, at the heart of Black culture, a natural sense or relationship to abstraction that has been extracted and in ways that are concurrent with Western colonial efforts, right? Like, but in the space of art history has found a place to hide and be masked in a way that in other spaces it hasn't. Yeah, it's Mondrian, a really early, beautiful Mondrian painting. And this is a painting that's at currently Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. And this is a painting in which they're building this A-frame hut. It's a kind of taking the shape of the canvas and kind of a turning. The shape of the canvas becomes a turn of the A-frame of the A-frame hut that's being built and finished with abstract paintings. And there's, it's a space of myth and magic in which the terms of abstraction become about culture as opposed to being about an emptying of content. It becomes about a building of culture and building of content. And there's always these things, and in this one there's lots of like sort of there's an old telephone and some plastic trash bags and other things happening in the folds of the borders. I know that I'm probably going long, so I'm going to try to speed ahead. Just wanted to share with you guys how I make the paper works. These are paper, the works that you see upstairs are on a velour velvety paper that I have been hand cutting for a very long time. I cut on the verso, and so I wanted to show you an example what this actual piece that's upstairs looked like in process. I basically make a wall of I make a wall of this cutting mat and hang it up. And I draw on the verso, and I often don't know exactly, I don't often know exactly what the finished thing will look like. I kind of turn it back and forth. So, there are elements that are photographic collage, and then there are elements that are painted with acrylic, like the hands and the feet are painted with acrylic paint and also cut and collage back in. The name of that one is Power Lord, after Nina Simone. And music becomes a way to enter a lot of the things that I'm making. This is the mothership connection. This is upstairs, and I'll take you through. But this is a sort of a diptych, and what I'm thinking about here is, this is the Brinks slave ship, which is a very famous image, historical image, and I'm often trying to understand, when I'm dealing with Black culture and history, there's a kind of there is a lot of pain or struggle in the story, but at the same time, there's this beautiful culture that has sort of come forth, right, from this. So if I think about the slave ship as a sort of a seed or a kind of meteorite that's kind of colliding and expanding, right, expanding a kind of universe. So the way that these are kind of set up is almost like a bullet that is sort of coming into this other space and exploding and sort of exploding it. And these are just some close-ups of the individual things. These are a lot of meteorites and butterflies, and I'll go through some of the shape language or image language. And I'll say just enough to leave questions for you. Some close-ups. Coding and claiming is the way that I think about how I'm using images and how I'm using the velvet material. I'm interested in the poetics of Blackness. I'm interested in this question, how does an artist create a work about the body without the body being present? So much, and it's a personal feeling, but so much gets put on the image of the Black body as a kind of progenitor of meaning and a progenitor of identity. But so I question what else? What else is there? What else is there? How do you show the Black presence if you don't have a body? Becomes a tough problem, right? All of a sudden. I'm using velvet. Velvet became this material that I used a long time ago in 2002 when I was in Skowhegan, and I found myself as a trained oil painter, not too bad, by the way, and dealing with trying to question Western art history and canon, and realizing that I was sitting in a kind of contradiction in the sense that I'm trying to master the master's tools, and it's not really something kind of not hitting, and so I kind of decided to give that up and think about materials, how materials are personal to me. And I came to velvet. My mom collected a lot of kitschy things, late 70s sort of soul sisters with afros on velvet and Black love figurines and things like this. And so I said, it's gonna be velvet. It's a Black, rich material, and surely there's this sort of metaphors the mind. And I went on this kind of trajectory that I'm on. This, what you're seeing here is, I'm just gonna, if I click again, this will turn into a video. And what you're seeing is a gourd. It's not like a giant sculpture. This is actually just like this big, but it looks weird in this image. Looks massive or something. So I'm kind of coding this thing with velvet using an electrostatic sort of process. So in this process, there's a electrical box that's clipped to the gourd that is rendering a negative charge on the object. And as I wave this sift of microscopic fibers around it, it actually attracts the fibers to the gourd, what becomes enmeshed in the glue, the adhesive, the Black adhesive. And that's really wonderful because those fibers, like, they come in and they like stand on end and they fill in really, really tight, and you get this really plushy surface. So when you see Beacon upstairs, this is how it was made, and this is actually one of the gourds that are in that sculpture. And that's my beautiful studio at the American Academy in Rome, which I'll get to. So image language, these are the ways that I'm thinking about this. I started out cutting these floral forms and building a kind of body out of this flux of cut floral images. And as I kept doing that, I started to imbue the body with images to kind of build and build and build a kind of on the body, trying everything I can do to not make a black figure, you know, just like but trying to have a figure that's there and not there, and how it is there be something more than just an image of a figure. So you'll see gourds. Think about navigation by stars, the liberation. Follow the Drinking Gourd is an American folk song that literally gives one directions on how to go north along the Underground Railroad. Stones and geologic rock are about healing. African sculpture becomes about healing. It also becomes about transformation and deep time, as do butterflies, as Bob explained wonderfully. I go to Rome, and that image language becomes more. I find the ocean becomes this space to mind that connects us, connects the diaspora. I find pottery and specific types of pottery that have the black presence and these ancient things that speak to a longer trajectory of us in the space of history and culture that we're often erased from. And these are very specifically things that I pulled when I went to Italy. The Testa di Moro, which is a Sicilian arts crafts, which is I have one of them in the Beacon, and this Etruscan Jenniform pot, which has these two. So this thing, just so you know, like the Testa di Moro, the practice, which is the top left, that's a practice that goes back to the 10th century in Sicily. It really is a space that identifies Sicily. If you go to Sicily, you're gonna people are gonna try to sell you a Testa di Moro, or they're gonna try to sell you a pine cone, or some granita, which is really good. It's really simple. Every piazza has, and it really is about the Moorish occupation of Italy. The Etruscan Jenniform pot dates back to the 2nd century AD. And these things are so incredibly beautiful. This one happens to be in the Museo Giulia, which is an Etruscan museum in Rome. This pottery, this red slip clay that became very popular in the Roman Empire all comes from North Africa. And the technology comes from North Africa. And then there is a very contemporary conversation around Mussolini's cache of objects that he's pulled from Libya and Eritrea and Ethiopia during the Italian sort of colonial period. That is a big question right now, a big conversation in Italy. So this is me at the American Academy in Rome, in front of my studio before I ate a lot of pasta. I came there to look at this particular fountain, the Fontana de Moro, that sits in Piazza Navona, and it's a black Neptune. It's a more like Neptune, and my question was, okay, why is there a perfect image of a black Atlantis sitting in the center of Rome? And it led me into this whole body of work, just that question, and there was a lot there. I quickly became bored with this fountain because there was so much there to mine. Oops, sorry. Okay, was that it? Sorry. Oops. Okay, so this journey took me from mainland Italy, definitely went to the south, Puglia, black people, black culture, Moorish culture. That's like really heavily in the south part of Italy, and then Sicily is like super. I would say the difference is that when you're in Rome, everybody talks about Sicily as like being kind of crazy, or like the Romans, but I also felt like in Rome, I felt very much like a foreigner. But in Sicily, I felt very welcomed, and I didn't feel like anybody was that weird at all. It felt like I'm from Jersey, right? So I felt like, okay, I'm home. I'm back home. All right. So it took me to Egypt as well, North Africa. I needed to engage with these kind of spaces to see how it all kind of connected, and it took me to making this piece called Sphinx. So I'll just show you some detail. This is really to show you some details of the work that I made there as well. And if you haven't been upstairs, you'll see some works that are very tactile. The work photographs, strangely, because it is black velvet, so it tends to flatten out. So, okay, we can move on. This is the Sphinx of Giza. It's amazing. And these are pyramids of Giza, and that's me and my partner. And this is Sphinx, which is a very 90, I believe it's at least 8 feet tall, and 4 feet wide. Which brings us to collaborations that Igor and I have done. It was amazing to meet Igor Santos at the American Academy of Rome. Igor is Japanese and Brazilian, and his music falls in the genre of experimental music. He's a trained classical pianist, and he uses something called found sounds within his work. And Igor and I started to talk about the relationship of our work and thinking about the Atlantic and oceans and this kind of transnational relationship of migration that we both kind of engage in. And Igor began to talk to me about the idea of the nocturne, or the genre of the nocturne in classical music, which is all about the invocation of night and how that gets done through these musical instruments. And he sent me like this beautiful music. And I'm trying to do that in my work and as well. So I learned a lot from Igor. Hopefully he learned something from me. He's a complete genius. So this is me running around getting materials at Porto Portese in Rome, a big sprawling 2-mile flea market. And Igor and I went to this park of defunct fountains called Villa Schiata, not too far from the American Academy of Rome. And he had all these high-powered mics, and he was there to study fountains as well. So we found ourselves both looking. He was thinking about music, water, and fountains in relationship to classical music and how to screw that up. And I was also thinking about water and fountains and how to screw that up. So it was really interesting. So we went and with these high-power mics and that even pick up reverberations of the water flowing underneath it's just really, really sensitive microphones. So this is Beacon, which is upstairs. And I really used the Testa d'Amore, which is a Sicilian folk story from the Italian South, and thinking about the Underground Railroad with the gourds becomes this kind of the American South meeting the Italian South, a kind of way of me sort of finding a place for myself very far from home and understanding that I kind of belong there, and that the work that I because of the specificity of who I am, I actually had every reason to be there and to be doing the work that I was doing because of where I was from. So it's kind of a revelation, right, of sorts. And I'm not sure if the sound is working. Let's see. Okay, the sound's not working on that, but you can hear Beacon for yourself when you go upstairs. It has a sound component and that Igor scored and the found sounds that we use together. And you can see in this iteration in Florence, with this beautiful glass pavilion, there was a sort of these two speakers that filled the room. We kind of spatialized the sound because we had space and time. And, Beacon is is now a one-channel piece here in the museum. Thank you guys for coming. Now, because it's not all about me, I have the pleasure of introducing Igor Santos to you all to build on what Bob has already said. I wanted to talk to you about Igor's piece, Offering, which is the second collaboration that Igor and I did together that is really kind of very in his world, and it's as a prepared piano piece. So Igor says, Offering is a multimedia composition that employs found footage, found sounds, quotations from ocean-inspired music, and a technique the composer calls mimetic cycles. This technique involves fluidity, transitioning between video, sound, and live performance, as well as navigating through historical periods. In Offering, the ocean serves as a central theme, allowing for discussions of migration, evoking ancient myths and symbols, and highlighting transnational influences. The piece pays tribute to Brazilian musician Baden Powell, whose work embodies the essence of cross-cultural dialogue and who himself has explored the theme of oceans in his compositions. Thank you, guys.